Welcome to Playfully Orange, our conversations about arts and culture here in Central Florida. And today we're going to get to know Coralie Claeysen-Gleyzon, I think. Hello, Coralie.
Hi, Terry.
I said I think because your last name always am I tripping over my tongue or did I really get it right?
It's great. You did it great.
That last name would kind of indicate that you maybe are of French heritage.
Right? You're right. So my maiden name Claeysen is actually Belgian. It's an old Flemish name.
And did you grow up in France or Belgium?
Actually, so we're not Belgian. We are French. Our family is French, but I grew up in Niger, in Africa.
Oh my.
Yeah.
And when did you come to the United States?
So it was a long trip, and my parents lived in Africa. So I grew up 9 years in Niger, and then went back to France for another 10 years, and then moved to England to study. And after 9 years in England, where I got my first job, had my first child. I moved to the Middle East, Qatar and Lebanon, for 3 years, and then moved to the United States in 2011. So it was a long trip.
My goodness, you have been around.
A little bit.
And what brought you to Central Florida?
Well, so my husband is a professor at UCF, and he teaches Shakespeare, Milton, and cultural theory. So he got a job in Orlando, and actually he got two job offers at the time. It was Orlando and Texas, somewhere in Texas. I think it was Austin, and we picked Orlando. We felt it was a perfect place for our family. So
Great. Well, we want to talk about you, and you are your position you have is as a curator at the Orlando Museum of Art.
Right, that's correct.
What brought you? What was your inspiration to go that line of career?
So that's a great question. Initially, I think I always knew I was a creative person. Initially, I wanted to go to the Beaux-Arts, which is, the academy in French where you learn how to draw beautifully and sculpt beautifully. My dad had a few questions about that. He said, what are you going to do with that? So, but at the time I was also, as a teenager, I was always really interested in advertising and, the messages that you can pass via images. So I decided I wanted to become a creative in advertising, and that's how I started my studies. And it was always mixing communication, culture, and arts. And then eventually, that path narrowed down, and as I decided, marketing's not really my thing. That's not really what I like to do. I like the arts a lot more, and went back into that path fully.
When you first came to Central Florida, didn't you start or participate in some galleries?
Yes, I did. So, in fact, the first 2 years I lived in Orlando, I was a volunteer with SNAP Orlando, helping the team co-curate, the exhibitions. So the pop-up exhibitions, that was before they had a beautiful gallery. That was an incredible experience, getting to meet all these fantastic local artists, but also international artists. And then for a while, I was a director and curator for a local art gallery called Jai that was located downtown Orlando. And then the museum position opened, and I applied and got the job. So here I am, 5 years on.
Can you tell us what a typical day as a curator at the Orlando Museum of Art is like?
Sure. It varies. It's a fantastic job. I really love it. Ideally, my day would be a lot of research. That's what curators need to do. But it's not only that. Of course, there's a lot of admin tasks, everyday tasks and things like that, like any job, I guess. But what I love the most is being that connecting point between artists and the public, really. We've got a privileged, role because we get to meet the artists, a lot of them in their studios, and we get to see the work before it's audience ready, so there's privilege that's attached to that, and I realize that it's a lucky position to be in, but also so it's talking to artists, being that liaison, and then preparing shows, exhibitions, doing the research that's needed, and then conceptualizing shows, also working with partner institutions. So it's really the role of a connecting person, connector. It's very enjoyable.
In the structure of the Orlando Museum of Art currently, or in the past, how has that role worked in relationship to the director of the museum?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So my position as curator is, I would say, is new. So I was employed in 2018 as associate curator, and our team is very small. Curatorial team is only 2 people. We have a chief curator, Hansen Mulford, who has been here several years, has been an entire career. Yes. And then I joined the team 5 years ago as an associate curator and got promoted just this past September as curator, which is great. It's a great feeling. But really, our team is very small. So 2 curators, 1 registrar, and then we have a full-time preparator, and then adding to that team, But the relation with a director is interesting because directors change. They all have various specificities, and some directors are really interested in curating or kind of, helping direct the ship in that sense. That they're selecting the exhibitions, but some directors are not. They're more. They take on the role more of a fundraiser and kind of staying backstage in that sense, So it varies, depending on leadership.
Well, let's look around the rest of the community, because I know you get around. What has been inspiring to you in Central Florida?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is Orlando is really a fantastic place. It's a breeding ground. I love it for that. Coming from outside of Orlando, I think everyone's heard about Orlando in the world. The greater planet has heard about Orlando for different things that actually, when you live in Orlando, you know Orlando for, or in the US. So the US knows Orlando because of the theme parks. When you come from outside of Orlando, you imagine that Orlando is way more than just the theme parks. You think it's an international city. But then when you move here, you realize it's a very, very young city. And that's the thing that strikes me the most, and still, I still realize Orlando is like a teenager to me. It's not an adult yet. It's not a kid, and it's got all that creative energy that I love. So I think that's why, being positioned here in Central Florida as well. We're not Miami. It's not Jacksonville. It's very different, and it's got a really strong identity in that sense. It's also that breeding ground for incredible creators, which is very exciting to me. But, and I guess a lot of us that are working in the cultural industries in Orlando, we want to keep that talent here. A lot of time it's frustrating because Orlando is a place of transition with a lot of talent coming in and going. So it's finding ways to keep that talent here and kind of reinvesting that creative energy within the city,
Well, we are very glad that you and your creative energy is here, and we want to keep you here as well. Thank you today for talking with me, and thank you for the folks watching this issue of Playfully Orange.
Thank you, Terry.
Yep, thanks.